$100 billion. Now that's a staggering amount of cash. So when someone declares that they're going to raise that kind of fund, it's not uncommon for others to think they're out of their minds. However, some may question their sanity if someone claims they can pull off such a feat. After all, the man who briefly held the title of the richest person in the world lost a mind-boggling $70 billion overnight, marking the largest personal loss in history. But this same man, who goes by the name Masterson, once secured $45 billion in funding after a mere 45-minute meeting, equating to an astounding $1 billion per minute. He's also responsible for the greatest investment ever made. So you might be wondering, who is this Masason, and how did he achieve such remarkable feats? Welcome to our channel. In today's video, we'll discuss about Masayoshi Son, the craziest billionaire ever. Despite his record-setting successes, many view him as a reckless gambler who treats the economy like a casino, causing catastrophic damage. He once threatened to set himself on fire if a business deal failed. Nonetheless, I find him intriguing. I create videos about companies like Uber, Yahoo, and TikTok, and Masterson always seems to be involved with them. It's like being in a whole movie where Jim Carrey sees the number 23 everywhere, except for me. Every road leads to Masason. Most people know little about him, but they should. He is changing the world and making daring bets on our future. His story is incredible, awe-inspiring, terrifying, and downright insane. So, is Masason the shrewdest tech investor in the world? Or is he just the luckiest man alive? He comes from humble beginnings. His grandparents fled to Japan from South Korea on a small fishing boat with no food or shelter and could not speak the language. Masason's start in life was similarly bleak. Growing up, Masa faced discrimination due to his heritage in Japanese society. He was even pelted with rocks by his classmates. Meanwhile, his father struggled to make ends meet, working odd jobs like raising pigs and selling illegal liquor. Despite these challenges, Masa was determined to build a better life for himself. The bullying he faced only fueled his drive to succeed. By the time he reached middle school, Masa had already set his sights on becoming the most successful businessman in Japan. He idolized Den Fujita, the man who had introduced McDonald's to the country. Masa called Fujita's office incessantly, hoping to speak with him. When he finally flew to Tokyo and asked for a meeting, Fujita was impressed by Masa's determination and granted him a 15-minute audience. During their meeting, Fujita recommended computers for the future and advised Masa to pursue his dreams in America. Taking Fujita's advice to heart, Masa set off for California at 16 to chase his dreams. He worked tirelessly to improve his English skills and enrolled in an American high school. But he quickly realized that this path would take too long. So he convinced the school to allow him to take the college entrance exam early. Despite not feeling fully prepared, Masa managed to pass the exam and graduate from high school in less than a month. He went on to study economics and computer science at the University of California. Of course, Masa needed money to support himself, so he asked his friends if they knew of jobs that would pay him $10,000 a month for only 5 minutes of work per day. His friends thought he was crazy, but Masa's ambition and determination never faltered. He was the ultimate entrepreneur who spent 5 minutes every day coming up with new invention ideas. His goal was to patent and sell them, and although not all of his ideas were great, there were some gems in there. Masa realized that there were 3 approaches to coming up with ideas. The first was to search for solutions to problems he had in his life. For example, when his round pencil rolled off the table, he considered a square or hexagonal pencil instead. The second approach was to look at things from the opposite perspective, like taking something big and making it smaller or something red and white. For example, he created a traffic light with different shapes so colorblind people could tell which phase the light was on. His final tactic was combining existing things, like a radio with a tape recorder, to get a radio cassette player. By the end of the year, Masa had a book with 250 different invention ideas. And the best of them was a pocket-sized device that translated text into different languages. He found a physics professor who agreed to help him build a prototype and started spending all his time pitching companies to buy his new device. He even paid another Asian student to take his place in the lectures that he was missing. Eventually, Masa founded a company called Sharp and agreed to buy the device patent for $1.7 million. And at the age of just 19, Masa was technically a millionaire. Meanwhile, as a side hustle, Masa had begun importing Space Invaders arcade machines from Japan to the US, where he was setting them up in bars and restaurants. Since this was a new thing for the US, they were a big hit. and within just 6 months, Masa had imported over 350 arcade machines and made a profit of over $1 million. The beauty of this was that because he put machines on credit and imported them by plane, which was more expensive but much faster, he would often make his money back from the machines before he even had to pay the machine supplier. It was clear Masa had great entrepreneurial instincts. Of course, it must also be acknowledged that he simply worked incredibly hard. It's understandably a lot of talk about the negatives of hustle culture. Still, Masa worked 7 days a week, sleeping as little as possible because he enjoyed the process, and clearly, it was paying off. Right after graduating, Masa returned to Japan because he promised his mother that he would be back as soon as he finished college. He knew he wanted to use the money he had made in America to help build an even bigger business in Japan. He began brainstorming new business ideas, mapped out 40 potential businesses he could start, and then ranked them based on different metrics. The best scoring idea was a company that distributed computer software. Thus, he created a new company called SoftBank. Now, at this point in the early 80s, personal computing was still in the very early phases. Still, Masa was extremely optimistic about the industry, especially after his old mentor had taught him to focus on computers. He believed SoftBank could become the top distribution company in Japan, even though he had absolutely no experience with software. He hired 2 employees to help him, and one morning he stood on a crate in the office and told them that SoftBank would become a billion-dollar company. However, both employees soon began to think he was crazy, and they quit soon after. At first, it looked like those employees might have been right. SoftBank struggled to take off, and Masa tried to start some magazines to generate interest in computing, but they didn't take off either. Everyone was telling him to stop, but Masayoshi Son refused to give up. He saw the potential in the software industry and knew that SoftBank could be a major player. He worked tirelessly, pouring all his time, energy, and money into the company. Eventually, his hard work paid off. SoftBank became Japan's leading computer software distributor, and Masayoshi Son became a billionaire. But he didn't stop there. Masayoshi Son continued to innovate and invest in new businesses. He saw the potential of the internet in the early 90s, long before most people had even heard of it. He boldly invested $20 million in a small company called Alibaba, which was just starting out in China. That investment would turn out to be one of the most successful in history, as Alibaba turned out to become one of the largest e-commerce companies in the world, and SoftBank's investment in it is now worth over $150 billion. Masayoshi Son's entrepreneurial spirit and ability to see opportunities where others saw only obstacles have made him one of the most successful businessmen in the world. He's been accused of throwing billions of dollars into companies like WeWork and Wag, a dog-walking app under the pretense that they're tech companies, even though they clearly aren't. Critics claim his approach of investing billions based on 15-minute meetings and gut instinct is downright reckless. Take WeWork for example. He invested a whopping $4 billion after a meeting that lasted less than half an hour without even bothering to look at the pitch deck. But it's not just his hasty investment decisions that are raising eyebrows. Even some of Masa's companies have found his giant investments to be more of a curse than a blessing. He encourages his companies to think bigger and act crazier. But because he gives them far more money than they need, they often start spending like there is no tomorrow and pursue growth at all costs. In short, Masa's investment style is both praised and criticized, depending on who you ask. Love him or hate him, there is no denying that Masayoshi Son has left an indelible mark on the tech industry and business world. His legacy will undoubtedly be studied and analyzed for years to come as people try to understand the mind of this fascinating and enigmatic figure. Thank you so much for watching, we hope you liked the video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for upcoming videos.